going to show how to make this Hex Grill effect using Affinity Photo's Procedural Texture Filter. I noticed this was a background in one of my earlier videos that I'd done using, I think it was iMovie, and I thought, oh, that looks sort of cool, and I thought it'd be pretty easy to do using a procedural texture. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. It consists of a couple different effects. The first one is this hexagon grid array. The second one is sort of this vignette where it sort of fades out at the corners here. And then the third one is a gradient map which goes over the top of the whole thing and gives it this color that goes from, it's almost gray, but it's just a little bit off gray. To get started, I'll start with a new 1024. I'll make it also 1024 in RGB mode. Create that. Fill it with a black color. And add a procedural texture to it. This is a live procedural texture. I'm going to start with a single equation, assign it to all three channels, and add a single real custom input. I'll call that one scale. Set that to 6. Start with a standard coordinate system, VAR. I call it V0 this time because I'm going to have 3 more coordinate systems before I'm done, and I'll use this as the base for all 3 coordinate systems. Set that equal to a vec2 of Rx, Ry, and then multiply by A and divide by W. W is the width of the document in pixels. I could have divided by H. Either one is fine since this is a square document. Sometimes if I have a really wide document, I think it works better to divide by H. Anyway, just take a look at what that looks like, and there's my coordinate system. And again, with these coordinate systems, since it's a vector, it's assigning the first element of the vector to the red channel and the second element of the vector to the green channel. Blue doesn't get anything here. And then the red is going from 0 to 1 as you go from one side of the document to the other, since the A is set to 1. And then the green goes from 0 to 1 in the Y direction. And Y starts with a 0 up here. Now as I increase this, it goes from 0 to 2 across here. But since it can't display anything redder than a full 1 value of red, it goes from black to fully red when it gets to 1, and then it stays at fully red the rest of the way. Same thing with green. So this whole quadrant down here is pure yellow. Now I'm going to create my next coordinate system. I'm going to create a variable v1, and this coordinate will be a fraction of v0. So now you can see it creates a series of coordinate systems repeating over and over again. And I can drag this around over here. It doesn't work out correctly because those are some negative numbers over there, so you need to make sure you drag it into the area where it's repeating like that. My strategy for this will be to create 2 coordinate systems that are arranged so that the origin of each of them is set up in the middle of a position where the hexagon is going to be. And then I'm going to create a mask that sort of masks out one of the coordinate systems and only shows the other one. And I'll alternate between the two, and that's going to be able to give me my hexagon grid effect. The first thing I need to do, though, is I need to scale this so that it will be hexagon shaped, so that it's actually in the right position for the hexagon grid. To do that, I'm going to create a scaling vector. I'll put that up front here, call it SV, and that's going to be a vec2 of 1 comma square root of 3. I'm going to multiply my v0 by the scaling vector. That gives me a pattern like that, and I notice it's good. It's 4 across here, but it's quite a few more than 4 in this direction. So I'm going to actually normalize the scaling vector over here. Just hit normal, NORM, and it won't be exactly 4x4 anymore, but it'll sort of keep it in a decent range. The next thing I need to do is move the origin to the center of each of the rectangles. Right now it's over in the corner here, and I can do that just by subtracting off 0.5. And so that looks pretty good right now. Now I'm going to look at what this looks like if I take the length of this. So I'm just going to do length of V1. If I look at that, it looks a little bit weird. These are oval shaped, and if I actually put a step or function around this, step 0.3 comma length of V1 like that, I can see these are ovals. I don't want ovals, so these need to be circular. And it turns out I can get that circular shape back again by, if I take this fraction of V0 times SV minus 0.5 and divide by SV, it will return to the circular shape. So I stretch it out, but I don't want the coordinate system stretched out, so I have to shrink it back down again. So that's the first coordinate system, and then I need to create another one where the circles will all be over here. So I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to make a copy of V1 and call it V2. Paste it right over there. And then for this one, it turns out that I have to add a 1/2 in here. I could probably subtract a 1/2 too, but I'm just going to add a 1/2 up there. If I look at that one, it's hard to tell, but if I look at V1, it's shifted over compared to if I change this to a V2, it looks like that. So that looks good. I'm going to change this to, just to see what they look like together, put in V1 plus V2, like that. And so you can see where these are going to be. Now to set up the hexagon array, I'm going to use a mask that masks out half of these and applies the coordinate systems to that half, and then I'll mask out the other half and apply a coordinate system to that half. I'll start with another variable. I'll call this one V3. It's going to end up as another coordinate system, but for now I'm just going to show it as a step. And it turns out if I use the length of V1 as the edge for this step and apply it to length of V2, it gives me this sort of, it's almost like a hexagon pattern. It's a half a hexagon pattern arranged in rows like this. And what I'm going to do is put a coordinate system in the middle of each of these hexagons. They look like stripes sort of, but that's just because they're blurred together. So I can do that, and all I have to do to put a coordinate system in there is multiplied by V1. And now it's got a coordinate system in the middle of each of these hexagons. And now you can see the hexagon shape a lot better here too. Now I need to do the same thing in these black areas. So I could take 1 minus this step function, or what I'm going to do instead is add on, and this time I'm going to do step of length of V2, comma, length of V1. So I just reverse the order of those two. And I'm going to multiply that times V2. And now I've got my completed hexagon array like that. And I can just bring this up to get more hexagons. Okay. Now that I've got my coordinate system set up, all I need to do is to just look at the length of V3. So this one I called V3, and if I do length of that, I can see I have little circular, honeycomb patterns set up here. Now I want to do little circles to create this effect. To create the circles, I will use I could use step, but instead I'm going to use smoothstep. That'll enable me to round off the edges a little bit. So I'm going to call this one an E for an edge, and then I'll have E plus S. So S will be a factor that creates the smooth edge. So round that to that, and now I have to add 0 to 1 custom inputs, and I'll call the first one E and the second one S. and this one will be the edge, and this one will be the smooth, I'll call it smooth. Okay, and then if I bring this all the way down, so now I can bring this one over, I'll leave this one about here, and then bring this one up, and that shows where the edge of these circles are. So that's the basic effect that I want for hexagons. So I'll bring this up a lot when I make it. So bring it up to something about there. Just to review the equation here, I have a scaling vector, which is set up as variable. It's normalized, vec2, a 2-element vector with 1 and the square root of 3 as the values. And that gives me my positioning for my hexagon grids there. I'm not going to go over the math on that one. I did that in a previous video, but it enables you to position your hexagon grid in the correct position. So then next I have V0 coordinate system, which is just a standard Rx, Ry times A over W. Then I have this V1, which is just a fraction of V0, but I am multiplying by the scaling vector. I subtract 0.5 to center it, and then divide by the scaling vector to get a return it to a circular shape. This sort of makes it elongated. Then I'm going to do another one just like it, except that inside of the coordinate system I'm adding 0.5, and then I'm using this clever trick here where I'm taking this step of the length of V1 as the edge of the step, and then length of V2 is the thing I'm applying that edge to. I multiply that times V1. I do the same thing with step length of V2, length of V1 times V2. So I apply the second coordinate system to that one, and that creates this new coordinate system V3, which is a hexagon array. Then all I have to do is take the length of that and then apply a smooth step to that. Now for the next step, I will I need to add I want to have sort of a vignette up here that's going to sort of like a spotlight or a bright spot in the middle of this that fades out at the corners. So I'm going to create a new procedural texture filter for that one, and I'll just add a single equation, assign it to all 4 channels. And my first idea is, well, let's say if we're bright in the middle and dark on the edges, let's try that. So I'll first set up a coordinate system for this one. So I'll do vec2 of Rx, Ry. That way I can move it around, times A divided by W, so I can scale it, put in custom input real, A for scaling, and let's call that scale. And then I just want to make a length of V, and so that's it. It's close to what I want. I want it bright in the middle and dark on the edges. So I will have 1 minus that. That's pretty good. The next thing I want to do is I want to be able to make this into an oval shape. To do that, I'm going to multiply my coordinate V by a vec2 that consists of B and C. And B will be for the X direction and C will be for the Y direction. So I'm going to add 2 0 to 1 sliders, B and C. So when I bring B down, it's sort of hard to see, but I'm going to bring this up so you can see what's going on. Okay, so as I bring B down, it actually gets larger in the X direction. As I bring C down, it's larger in the Y direction. So I can control the shape of the vignette a little bit with that. So I'll call this eccentricity for X, and I'll call this one eccentricity for Y. Now the other thing I'd like to be able to do is to rotate this around. So I'm going to add an angle. I'll call it TH for theta, and I'll call it angle over here. Now to do rotation, I have to change these coordinates from regular coordinates to rotatable coordinates. So I have Rx times cosine of theta minus Ry times the sine of theta. And then I have Rx times the sine of theta plus Ry times the cosine of theta. Okay, so hopefully, yeah, now I can rotate this. If I hold the Shift key down, I can rotate it to any angle pretty easily, like that. Now, it might be nice, I'm going to add one more slider here. I'll just leave it as D, and this will be center spot. And so inside of this length, I'm going to subtract off D. Okay, so that gives me, I can control sort of a bright spot in the center and then have it roll off on the edge. So I could have none, or I could have a lot of it, but it'll just give me a little bit more control over this thing. I'm going to use the, I'm going to multiply that so it can sort of fade out on the edges like that. And I'll maybe just tweak it a little bit now that I can see the grid. For this formula, I'm using a rotatable coordinate system, so I have Rx times the cosine of theta minus Ry times the sine of theta for the first coordinate, and then for the second one, I'm using Rx times the sine of theta plus Ry times the cosine of theta for the second coordinate. And just scale it by A over W, and then I take 1 minus the length of V times this vec2, and then I'm subtracting D from that. And these are the values, the custom inputs that I'm using for that. All right, the last step for this is to add a gradient map. Just add the default gradient map, and that looks pretty cool, but I'm going to take this one off and change these to different colors. So I've got my colors set to RGB hex sliders right now, and so I'm going to put in the hex code for these. Okay, I'll start with this one. This one is almost completely black, just a little bit towards the blue. This one will be pretty much gray with just a little bit towards the blue, maybe even a little bit slightly purple. For this color, I'm using hex 060A 0E. And for this color, I'm using hex 2D 2B34. All right, that's the total effect. I sort of like it. It has a nice sort of organic, unobtrusive background look to it. So let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.